use the what? Interesting.
Let's go ahead and start. Welcome everyone. We're here with Sifu Slim, and we are doing yet another version of Writer's Repartee. And Sifu Slim is here from, you're in Honolulu, yes?
I am outside Honolulu. I'm near where Obama is from. I'm in Kaneohe, which is near Kailua, where Obama and the Marine base, where he hangs out in a house next to the Marine base, or he did when he was president.
Ah, okay. So Kaneohe Bay, it seems like I've been there. We used to have friends that lived near there. I think I actually ended up in Hawaii before I ever came to California. So I actually thought California was like Hawaii before I moved here. Little did I know.
There's quite a difference. We're back in time, I would say 20 years for better.
Yeah. We
don't have the formerly robust economy that California had. In some cases it's still robust, but in many cases it's not per capita robust.
Well, also the other thing I noticed when I got off the airplane is how it smells like flowers in the air. I think that's pretty wonderful. Does it still smell like flowers there?
It does smell like flowers. And my first trip to Maui several years ago, I got a lei when I arrived, and I was there two different times. I got the lei. And this time when I got to Hawaii, I had to seek out in Honolulu Airport someone to give me a lei. It wasn't the grand reception that it was the first time. So you have to hunt your leis these days.
Yeah, it's harder to get laid, right?
You can say that.
All right, so super great having you on. Sifu Slim, just to give a little introduction, is author of at least 2 books that I know of: The Aging Athlete and Sedentary Nation, and as well as a DVD series of workouts called Napa Valley Workout for World Travelers. And his website is sifuslim.com. And let's see if I can find a little about thing here. Let's see. Sifu Slim is a wellness consultant and webinar leader, and basically he helps groups and organizations get moving, keep fit, and combines humor with a positive message of daily wellness and health. And so Sifu Slim is a popular personal lifestyle coach and corporate wellness consultant. So welcome, Sifu Slim. Great to have you on the show.
I'm very excited to be here, Chrisman.
So tell us, like I always, talk to people about books. So I always want to know, which book came first and why, and how did that happen? Tell the story of your first book.
All right. So many moons ago in 2008, I am taking my sweetheart under my wing, and that's how we became a couple. She was a Cuban physicist in her postdoctorate year, and she was 11 years my junior, so she would have been in her early 30s. I was in my early 40s, and she had a sign next to her bed when I did visit her room to pick her up one time for a date out in Goleta by the university, also known as Goleta, which is a Spanish sailing vessel. I saw a sign next to her bed, and it said, "Get up," with an exclamation point ×3. And I said, "So you have a problem waking up, do you?" And she said, "Yeah, it's been the story of my life." And I said, "Well, I did too, but once I got through high school, I no longer had that." And she said, "How did you change that?" And I said, "I'll show you tomorrow morning. If you'll meet me bright and early, I'll pick you up, and we're going to go do a morning physical movement program." You notice how I didn't say exercise, I said physical movement program. And we're going to have joyous movement, and then after that, there's going to be a big surprise. Now, who doesn't love a surprise, especially young ladies? So I picked her up out in Goleta, and I took her out to the place that has a volleyball field right on the coast by UCSB. And it's just a little park, and it had a picnic table at the time. Took her out for a workout, and it was in the fall, and the fall was dark. It was getting darker, and so I took her out, and we had a workout that went from darkness to sunrise, and we're horizontal on these mats doing these nice grounding exercises. I always try to have 1 foot or one hand touching the grass or the concrete, the sand, whatever's the ground. And so we did that. And then the sun rose, and she said, "Oh my gosh, isn't this beautiful?" And she said, "I haven't seen the sunrise that I can recall in over a decade." And I said, "Hallelujah, what a gift." And then when the workout was done, I said, "What are you going to teach me?" And she said, "Well, I'm going to show you some salsa." So she's Cuban, of course, people can dance salsa in Cuba. That's partially where it was invented. It went from Cuba to Puerto Rico, and it got its fine tuning in Puerto Rico. And so we did a little salsa dancing, which I love. I'm a former professional mascot. I love physical movement, especially the silliness and the suaveness of salsa. And it's silly because there's a lot of playfulness in it. So after that, we sat down, and I sat her down. And I went to my car, and in 3 trips, I brought back a 3-course breakfast. And so what could be more fun than burning calories, seeing the sunrise, dancing salsa, and having a home-cooked Sifu meal.
Nice. So how does that relate to your book Sedentary Nation? You could paint in all the numbers there.
I'm going to phase in Sedentary Nation. So what happened was, at the time, I wasn't working in the profession of wellness. It was my passion. And as many people do, especially people in their 40s, when they've had it with some of the rat race that's sometimes monetary rewarding but not as emotionally rewarding, they make a switch. And you've heard people jumping ship on the corporate world, or the corporate world tossing them out, and then they become yoga instructors and what have you. So she said, "What is your passion?" After I took her through my workout for 3 months, I said, "Well, what do you think it is?" And she said, "It's training people on physical movement and your outdoor physical activity, and then the lifestyle component, eating well, sleeping well, learning, having downtime," which I'm a big believer in. If you have too many activities, including too many kids and their activities, and taking care of your parents perhaps, and all your nonprofits, you can't have downtime. And I believe that downtime is probably the most important part of being a sane human if you're going to last 50 years, 80 years, however many years on this planet. So I factored all that in, and then she said, "What are you going to do?" She said, "You're going to do a course?" And I said, "What do you think I should do?" She said, "Well, you're a good writer. Why don't you write a book about it and start with that, and then I'll help you film some DVDs." So that's what this book, Sedentary Nation, was. It was basically, over the next 8 years, I wrote 1,700 pages on this subject. This book has about 330 with some pictures. So it's got the history of physical movement. I don't know another book that has a timeline as extensive as this book. And then it also has the wellness component of how I live and how other people have taught me to live, like Jack LaLanne and Bruce Lee. Those 2 people were very excessive. Those 2 people didn't have a lot of downtime. So I try to factor in more balance into the equation than Jack LaLanne, who both of these people are my heroes. Jack lived a long life till 96. Bruce Lee lived many lives in 32 years, but then he passed away. So my idea is more balance, less excessiveness, because both of those people had traumatic things happen to them at a young age. I didn't have that. I had a life that went like this, pretty darn level, hard work and hard play and lots of rest, but I did not have the peaks and valleys of those 2 incredible people, which is probably part of the reason why I don't have an excessive personality.
Nice. So it sounds like in so many words that your book really came out of your relationship with your Puerto Rican girlfriend. Is that right? Cuban.
Emphasis on the salsa and the swing, because she had the hip moves that I have. Some hip moves, but nothing in comparison to her and to most of the Cubans I've met. They grew up, we dance and we move around, but they have the different swivel in the lower torso than we have. And I think in my next lifetime, I'm going to come back as a Cuban.
Yes, or you may know Vanessa, who teaches in town Brazilian dance. She's also pretty much of a hipster.
She's incredible, and she's a stronger, medium build person. So she's doing those moves in a larger frame body. My girlfriend was petite, 5'2", and she was just born to dance. And so Vanessa, again, athletic person, has got the same skill set.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, great. So Sedentary Nation as a book with one of the few books with like a time frame of movement, and obviously, I mean, it's still a sedentary nation. You know, like we're still a nation that's basically obese and basically getting diabetes and a bunch of other problems besides heart disease, and but I think diabetes and obesity. Those are kind of rising together, as I understand it. It's become pretty much chronic, but still, I would say there's been a huge upswing in the amount of people that are working out. I mean, do you ever go to the Mesa and see all those people running? I don't know what that race is, a 10K or something, but they do them like every week through certain months.
The Wednesday evening, Beach to Break or whatever they call that.
Right.
That's still going, and good for them that people are doing that in a group fashion and organized fashion. What I'm finding out there in the world of physical activity is you have pockets like Santa Barbara. I've spent time in Sun Valley, Idaho. I lived in Steamboat Springs. I'm in Kaneohe. Very few places in the world are more physically active than those few places I just mentioned. Hawaii is not physically active. It's amazing that we have a group of people, they're men, they're called Mokes, M-O-K-E, and that is a person who puts on size, because a lot of the people with the Hawaiian structures are large bone people and historically bred for, size. I don't know how that happened. I'm still want to look into it, but along the way, just like the Greeks said, the body beautiful is more godlike, and so they consider themselves gods on earth. These Hawaiians many moons ago somehow figured that it was either godlike or helped in warfare or looked good to be large, and they emphasized that in their evolution somehow. And so these people, when they are eating what they eat, which is a lot of carbohydrates, drinking a lot of soda, more carbohydrates, and there's a lot of vaping here from age 40 and below. I mean, it's vape galore. It's gone crazy, the vape situation. Young people, you walk by and people don't probably realize how toxic that stuff is. It's all chemicalized. And so these people called Mokes, they're known, and I'm not being pejorative. They'll tell you they're Mokes, and I'm not criticizing a lifestyle, but I'm suggesting that it's not healthful, basically. So that would be someone who's doing doobies, which I'm not against organic plants to lighten the stress load, that type of thing. I'm certainly not in favor of Prozac unless it's a life or death or a survival in the lifestyle component. If you can't sit down during class, you got to do something. But these people, these Mokes, they gain pounds. So it's called creeping obesity. So if you gain 10 pounds a year, after 10 years, what is that? 100 pounds. So doing the doobies, doing the brews or the sodas, and they're just getting larger. They're the incredible expanding human people. And once, even a person like me, if I were to get 10 pounds overweight, and I'm a fitness person by nature, it would be harder for me to do my workout, which isn't excessive, but it's not easy. And it would be harder for me to do that. So imagine these people with 20, 50, 150 more pounds. They've thrown in the towel on wellness, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And let's see, what's his name? Israel is the guy that's singing the
Brother is the most famous Hawaiian song of the last 20 some years, and they play it at the opening of the female volleyball, the Rainbow Wahinis, who are like the top 5-10 in the nation in female volleyball. It's the most moving song. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about that song. It's incredible. And this poor guy, he expanded to the size where I don't think he could walk towards the end his last few years.
Yeah. Yeah, and I assume that he died kind of prematurely for that reason, right? Something, I don't know what the
Yeah,
issue was.
I would guess that he was in his late 30s, something like that, if not younger. But he was probably 3 times the size of what he would have been if he just did some salsa dancing, for example. Are you back?
Oops, you broke up just a little bit there.
There we go.
Yeah, sorry. Do you mind saying that again?
So
you were saying that he was.
I would suggest that he was probably 3 times the size of what he would have been if he had been a salsa dancer and eating what you would call a 1960s type meal.
Yeah. So so it sounds like that you're finding people that are at least potentially clients over there that could use the information. But of course, the difficulty is people don't want to give up food, and people don't want to get up and exercise. So how do you get people to change?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I wish I had the answer. The only thing I know is that if you find, if someone's in crisis, they'll spend oftentimes whatever it takes in terms of time, energy, finances to alleviate that crisis, remediate that crisis. When someone's not in a crisis currently, if the word I was given by a friend of mine when I was talking about this question was, he said, if it ain't broke, they don't want to fix it. And so that's where you are. I mean, it's a lifestyle change. And so if you take someone who's gone out of shape, out of diet, under high stress, maybe working, or maybe just worried about not having a job, whatever it is, and you take that person under your wing, and then you say, I'm here to help, and they sign on, what are the chances that they're going to last for 3 months, just 3 months, in order to make that transformation and also contribute to your professional hourly rate at the same time? My guess is it's a very low percentage. So the personal trainers are working within this paradigm, and it's just like someone who's going through cancer, which I have a parent, my mother, who passed away a number of years ago from cancer in 3 different places, would not change lifestyle, would not go to a natural alternative healing place. Didn't the top Sloan Kettering in New York City, they did not mention once in 3 years anything about dietary changes. So that gives you, yes, I am pointing the finger, because that's one of the main things that you want to counsel people on. You don't want to feed the cancer sugar. And if someone's doing a lot of sugar, they are, for all intents and purposes, they are doomed. And no matter what you do, there's not a lot you can do if they're feeding that cancer. A lot of people have systemic candida. 65% of Westerners have it, and that's fed by sugar, stress, and a poor lifestyle. So what can you do with those people? Not a lot. I mean, that yeast is feeding, they're craving for cancer, just like fat cells. They want to be fed, and the easiest thing to feed them is glucose. So people are reaching for the pastas, the bread, the pizza, the sodas, the chips, all these things, and that's firing the biochemistry. How do you beat biochemistry? I mean, you've got God and higher power here, and you've got biochemistry here. I mean, how many people who are devout Christians would have a dalliance away from home with a non-significant other and break the rules? Well, many of them do. So that shows you the power of biochemistry and binging, even sex binging, or just a sex encounter, versus doing the right thing. And so that's what we're faced with in this world as coaches.
Yeah, well, I understand I just read this book not too long ago called Grain Brain. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Perlmutter and Grain Brain. So pretty interesting book. And one of the things he says is that when you eat, especially, I think he was talking about wheat at the time, that it actually has like a dopamine reaction, kind of like a narcotic. Essentially, you can kind of basically get addicted to eating bread or you know, crackers or things. And I notice if I eat bread for a couple days in a row, like I'll want it the next day. I just want it, you know. And I imagine it probably gets worse and worse. I personally like wean myself after reading that book. I wean myself pretty much entirely off of most carbs, and you know, occasionally I'll have one, but I do it just for fun. You know, I don't do it as part of my diet.
There's a real easy test for candida, or some people call it candida. You take a glass jar in the morning before you've rinsed your mouth, and you put in some water, you fill it up, and then you take about a dime's worth or a quarter's worth of spit, and you just spit in there. And it's the least expensive test I've seen on this. And, and normal sputum will remain up top. The candida yeast sputum, because it's systemic, it's all over. The yeast infection that females get, or men, especially uncircumcised men get, is usually gone in a few days if you take care of it. This is systemic, and this is yeast all over your body, including, I believe, your brain. It's messing up with your brain. And so in this case, it's in your sputum, and so you spit, and then it'll, if it is candida, which is 65% of Westerners, it's going to, and you know, I would say everyone now, because if you go to the poorer countries, not just the West, you'll see the sodas that these people are doing and the obesity.
I know.
Yeah. It's amazing. So I would probably guess it's 65% in the greater world now, but not the outback, you know, living off the land type people. And so the sputum will start going down in like a stringy type of a thing. And just like wine, they say it has good leg, and that's the yeast on the side of the wine glass.
Yeah.
That's what you'll see here in this glass. It'll go down like with legs, and then it'll sink. And that will happen in the first few minutes. And believe me, almost everyone you're going to see that has an eating addiction will have that. Is overweight or obese will have that. And it's unfortunate because it's hard to get rid of, because it's feeding on sugar and it's driving our biochemistry. It's more powerful than our normal emotional resistance is.
So what's the crisis? You know, like when do people get to the crisis point where they're willing to make a change in your experience?
Well, I know one extremely fit mother of two. The kids are right before age 10. This woman was a standout high school athlete. She got married young, and she is incredibly built. She has legs that she set her district champion in high jump, this type of thing. Her boyfriend in high school was the golf champ. And now he's a workaholic, and she is a mom, but still retains her fitness acumen. So her husband is 100 pounds overweight right now. He's in his 30s and former athlete, but he doesn't have time anymore. He's probably still good in golf, because I've seen a lot of people who are twice the size, but if they're great athletes, they could still play golf, and they still have that touch. They still have the touch with darts, with shooting jump shots and foul shots, etc. So once an athlete, you could be considered always have that touch. But could he play a sport like a field sport or a court sport? No, he's too big. So I said, what do you tell him? You know, I mean, because she wanted to connect him with me so I could help him. And he's never called, of course. That's just the normal way it is. And she told me that what she told him was, it's not really threatening. It's a real reaction from the heart and her eyes. She said, your body is no longer appealing to me, and you are no longer appealing to me. So what you suggest I do, because you still want to have intimacy. I don't know the finality of that, but she confided that in me, because it's a hard issue for her. And I would guess it's a hard issue for many people who are attracted to that one person. But let's say if they both became supersized, or they both became somewhat debilitated, you don't have to be supersized to be inactive. Some people are inactive, and you couldn't tell just by looking at them unless you saw them walk. They have less energy, less biomechanically gifted gait. So that's what she told me, and I'm open for your thoughts on that one.
Sounds like a crisis to me. But it depends. It depends on him, because if he goes, oh yeah, I see this as my responsibility or my doing, or I could do something to change this. I mean, that would depend a lot on how he responded. Like if he may see it as a crisis of, oh God, my wife hates me, or like I got to get out of this. She's blah blah blah. Like if he's blaming it on her, that it's a different kind of crisis. If he takes responsibility on himself and says, like I really lost it. I should be working out or whatever. Then that might be the kind of crisis that could get him to actually make that sort of change. But I can imagine it really has to do with how people interpret things.
Yeah, there are many ways that could go. There's something called flipping someone off without flipping someone off, and that's what he's telling himself. Really, he's a workaholic. He sees how hard it is to cover his overhead, to provide for all of his staff members, and to provide for his family. So think of his basket in high school. He didn't have to work as much. Most people don't have full-time jobs in high school, and they've got a free place to live, usually with some free food, so he could play golf and do his studies. Well, now he doesn't have time for golf or his studies, and he has lots of expenses. He's got employees, he's got kids, and so on with the challenges of life. And so I'm a single person. I chose to wellness and downtime over the rat race because I already am in the rat race so much that my recovery time, if I didn't have it, I think I would be in an insane asylum at this point in my life. And I knew that within the first year of work. I left college in Virginia, had a job at the Paris Stock Exchange in 1985 and 86. I'm working with people who've been in the workforce for many years. They're smoking, they're going to these big lunches with drinking, they're going out drinking at night. Not all of them, but many of them. That was the way people were working. And I'm sure if you went to New York and Wall Street and these types of places, now Honolulu, commercial realtor in Honolulu, there's a lot of after dinner partying that goes on and schmoozing. So I was around that, and it was exhausting. And the smoke, I'm allergic to smoke, that was overwhelming me. I have on a nice t-shirt right now, but I had on business attire in Paris, and I'm going home, and I figured out I didn't have to dry clean those things when they're full of smoke. I just hung them out of my apartment in the dead center of Paris, and the air overnight, even though it was moist, the air would take the smoke away, so I could wear that suit either the next day or switch suits and go 3 or 4 days later. Thank God for that. But when it rained, I had to wake up at 2 a.m. and grab my and hang it on the inside of the window so that it didn't get soaked. But I mean, those were some of the challenges I had. And I'm thinking, as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old person, I'm basically exhausted, and I feel like an old man at the midweek, and at the end of the week, I needed to recuperate. And I was a fitness person, and I'm thinking, this is crazy. I don't know how I'm going to live like this. So I never made the move to get married or to have kids. And that's how I can be what I've grown into over the last few years. After many years of working on self-mastery, I've grown into a guru type person. So if you want, we check in on that.
Yeah, well, good segue. So the idea here was to kind of get to how did you become a guru without an ashram, and so you're kind of headed in that direction right now. So what is a guru, and what is to start out, and what is an ashram, and then we'll head into that question about you.
I have a little funny snippet. A regular guru. How do you know you're a regular guru? That's when you sip the right kind of tea. That's a regular guru. Now, when you're a successful guru is when someone else prepares your tea for you.
All right.
When you have an ashram, you have devout people, devotees who are following you, and hopefully some people who've seen you speak and assist other people. and saw your mission, and they helped you with donations. Then you have enough money for your ashram, and that's a location where you live, and you can hold therapeutic meetings of the yoga kind, the meditative kind, the speaking kind, and you can greet visitors, and you can do some healing and some connecting people with your connection to wisdom and higher power energy, that type of thing. And so some people are born with that. I was born differently. I was born with the HSP personality, which is the highly sensitive personality. I could feel people's pain. I could feel their happiness. I could feel stress, bright lights, sensory things, like if you're walking through Kmart, you go past the solvents. All those fumes were always overwhelming to me. So that's my personality. But when I chose, maybe this lifestyle chose me, but partially I think I chose it based on that year or a few years working in Paris. The idea is that I said the rat race, I'm not being good to myself and I'm not helping other people. I'm having to keep my guard up all the time. And, people are trying to sabotage me on a regular basis. And that's the normal business world. Sorry to rain on people's parade, but that's my feeling on it. And I think it's backed up by the way people get hired and fired and get memos written up about them. So the ashram, I just mentioned that, but we talked about the ashram, being a guru without an ashram. So do you want to ask me anything before I chime in on that?
Well, yes. So the ashram, so a guru is someone who has other people make their tea. But seriously, what is a guru? I mean, everyone, of course I've heard the word kicked around, and of course I've heard of these ascended masters and so forth, but just say, like, in your view, like, seriously, what is a guru?
The simplest way in English to put it is a teacher. And so, a teacher who's worked on themselves, and downloaded basically from the universe, from a higher power, from God perhaps, and their lineage of other masters who taught them along the way, and the reading that they did and the studies that they did. It's to delve into self so that you can eliminate self. So you study self, you get to know who you are, you create this incredible awareness, and then you say goodbye to self. Now, does the ego ever leave you? I have not met someone who's that enlightened, that the ego left them. I mean, the ego is always present, but you can use your ego in a silliness. Now, this is where you've heard of the gurus and the swamis who get the giggles and are laughing all the time. It's because you get to realize that life is so chaotic and life is so zany, and your thoughts on it in these fleeting moments that come through your visions and your thinking patterns are so silly that it just promotes and provokes laughter. And that's the ultimate way to be, is the silly guru, the guru of peace, man, woman, etc., who can just deal with the chaos of life, the dangers of life, the good things in life, and work their way through, and making sure that they're grounded and they can help other people be grounded along the way and pick up other people. And I don't think the ego minds when you help other people and they thank you. I think that's very rewarding for a guru type person or a teacher type person. So a guru would just be an advanced teacher.
So just a small quibble, or maybe it's not really a quibble, but it's maybe more of a question, I guess, which is, I hear people often talking about the ego as something negative to be gotten rid of, or to be gotten through, or gotten over, or gotten around, or to be lived outside of. And yet it seems to me that usually that the ego's function seems to me to be very constructive, which is its purpose is to survive. Now, clearly, maybe because it was formed at during some previous geological age, just joking there, but in some previous time where our concerns were very different, You know, we're not in a situation now where, you know, it's like an eat or be eaten kind of situation anymore, usually. And so, you know, the ego is maybe wired in the wrong way, or in a way that used to make sense in evolution, but no longer does. But isn't it seems to me that there is still a very powerful purpose for this part of ourselves that wants to be alive, to survive. I mean, obviously, it's hard for me to imagine someone transcending their need to be alive.
Yeah, I'd have to read up on what the great swamis say about ego, but I do know that even if you are an enlightened being, and I've been in the presence of some enlightened beings, they do not lose their personality. So that to me tells you their ego is never dormant. The ego has a purpose, and it's prevalent. And our biochemistry does not leave us either. The molecules and the hormones and the way we process our nutrition and our thoughts is always there. And you know, you have to do your practice in order to overcome some of the obstacles presented by your biochemistry and by your ego. I mean, if you drop an anvil on the foot of an enlightened person, you may hear an F-bomb because it's an uncontrollable reaction. Folks, maybe there are some people who can overcome that. I've not heard about that, but that's, you know, a human being is still a human being after all. But these people are devout in the way they handle their practice and the way they've reached a certain level of attaining enlightenment, which, you know, I'm not to that level, but I am someone who believes he can help other people, and in so doing, he helps himself quite a bit.
So I guess my next question, to kind of go to the heart of this question of the guru without the ashram, is, do you, first of all, consider yourself a guru? And second of all, as a guru, do you need an ashram?
Okay, so that's a wonderful question. So when I years ago was working away at writing books, I was writing detective fiction, I was writing articles, etc. Before I got into wellness. Someone told me that you were a Renaissance man. This was back when I was in my 30s. And so I looked that up. I saw Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, Ben Franklin, Da Vinci, all these people were Renaissance men. And I changed the word Renaissancer to include females in that discussion. So someone else told me that. Along the way, I did all these years of martial arts. And my martial arts instructor was the one who said, you know what, you are a Sifu, not of martial arts, but of the martial arts attitude and the fitness component and the wellness component. You are a Sifu. So that's a teacher in Cantonese. In Mandarin, it's Shifu. And in Japanese, it's very similar, not exact, to the word sensei, oh great sensei, oh sensei. So someone else told me both of those. And then when I've been doing that self-mastery for, 40 years, I've been chipping away at it with lots of pitfalls. And I could have a pitfall later today and tomorrow, and you have to come through that. That's the hard part with life. It's very challenging. Sometimes we make it the most challenging on ourselves, but life's challenging. And so a few years ago, when someone was referring people to me for wellness and for fitness, they were in the clinical side of their business, and they said, well, I'm going to send you to someone, Sifu Slim, and he's a little bit different. He's different than I am. He's more of a guru type person. So they said that, and I said, you know what? I'm 53, now I'm 54. I said, you know what? That's kind of what I am. I'm a person who digs in deep, who works on self, and who helps people with authenticness, with authenticity, I should say. And so that's where I am. I'm not holding myself out to be the greatest guru, but if people slow down and they tap into the gifts that were given to me by Jack LaLanne, Bruce Lee, and many martial arts instructors, and reading, and my interaction with Chrisman, all these things, if they slow down and they adopt some of these things, I believe it will help them.
So you've done a good job of outlining what kind of teacher you are. And so as that kind of teacher, do you feel that you need an ashram, or maybe the Garden of Hawaii is your ashram? So do you need an ashram, and if so, why?
So the question I presented to you when we first connected was this guru without an ashram. So in the small business world, which you've been in, haven't you, Chrisman?
Yeah.
So the small business world comes with it some incredible challenges. So you've got all this overhead stuff, then you've got liability stuff, you've got rent increases quite frequently, and then you have staffing people, and you want this thing to work. So it can eat you alive. So if you take that small business to a medium-sized business, and you say, now we've got an ashram, which is like a temple that you live in, or a church with a living quarters. Now you say, I want to do this with this big building with all these expenses. How do you remain in your guru type state? How do you do your practice? How do you get your downtime? How do you not turn into a business person where you're seeking donations and running around marketing all the time? And that's the challenge. And I think that, the modern world, I mean, if you look in Gandhi's time, which wasn't too long ago, it's, less than 100 years ago, it was, his lifestyle wasn't cheap based on the amount of money you could make in that day, but he did not have liability insurance. I'm sure Gandhi did not. Had all these people living around him, and they were providing food for him, and they got a place to live. So it was a much easier deal. There was no workers' comp insurance, but now all of those things have created a financial nightmare, basically, for businesses and for churches. So it's such a big deal. So I think doing it without an ashram, if you can, is a wonderful way to go. Now, how do you monetize your gurudom? And that's something that I'm still working out. How do you do that? Are you doing more webinars? Are you doing online discussions? I mean, Tony Robbins is a guru in the world of success and motivation. And he's doing it in a very large way, in the tens of millions of dollars per year. How do you do that if I'm different than someone like Tony Robbins. I want to do mind, body, and spirit, but I don't want to be over the top with the rock concert option that Tony Robbins offers, which I'm not suggesting is a negative, but that's not who I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. So Guru Ashram essentially is there's a kind of, sounds like there a kind of tension between getting your message across is one thing, and then also how do you get your message across to enough people, and then there's a natural costs that come into getting your message across, and then so how do you meet those expenses without kind of driving yourself nuts? And it's a good question, and part of the difficulty I see is that technology is helpful, but at a certain point, which happens usually within a few months, a new technology is no longer helping you. It's just something that you have to have in order to kind of stay even, as opposed to being something that gives you a competitive edge. Nothing really gives you a competitive edge for very long. And in short order, someone else figures out how to do it like a lot better. And so, you see certain people kind of having this, huge impact in something that they've created. And the vast majority of people I've noticed, like online, yes, you have a global audience and you also have global competition. So it becomes really interesting to try to figure out, how do you be in that, or how do you be in that without it stressing you out? And those are all really good questions. It seems to me like one direction is to, as you've done, like really dig into who you are and what you can do that no one else can really do, which is basically be you. I mean, do you agree that that's kind of that's the competitive edge that you have?
Yeah, that's the wonderful point. And we have to remind ourselves, and that how many movies do we hear, you know, the punchline of a part of the movie anyway, is to just be yourself. You know, do the right thing, be yourself, just be who you are, and good things will happen. Well, being who you are and working on self and improving who you are is not a bad thing either, and learning the, you know, the tricks of the trade. But so we talked about Sedentary Nation, which is an everyone book. Everyone can read that. Kids to grandparents can read that. And that talks about, you know, wellness and the idea of what's happened to us over many thousands of millennia. But that's not a niche. That's an every person book. I did write this one, and this book, The Aging Athlete, is a niche. And this is people of the high school, college pros, ex-military, ex-Broadway dancers, ex-general contractors, anyone in the high performance physical realm. So I'm the only one I know who's taken that subject up under this premise. And what I learned over the course of my first interview, and then I went on to do more than 600 interviews on this subject, is the high performance physical people to do 5+ hours per day, high school, college pro, military, general contractors, all these people, physical people, when they leave that high performance era, it doesn't matter if they're 18, doesn't matter if they're 17, doesn't matter if they're 55 as a general contractor, 28 as an ex-Green Beret, 90% of those people, unfortunately, are, because they're trained, in my opinion, they're trained on performance, not on wellness and recreation. They become predominantly, not completely oftentimes, but predominantly sedentary for most of the rest of their lives, starting the first day they leave the high performance. So you have to ask yourselves, out of the first through fourth string, or the person who quit high school football in their sophomore year, what was there between that person and the starter and the second string person on the football team? You could say the excessive personality trait was in the first and second string person much of that time. The person who's the Green Beret, how they didn't go into the Air Force or the Coast Guard, they wanted to be the Green Beret. What flipped that switch at age 19 or 22 in that person, right? Male and female, I've interviewed both. And oftentimes they'll tell me this, that it was an excessive personality thing. They had to prove something to themselves, their father, their drill instructor, whatever, and they flipped that switch. And when the 4 years in the military or the 2 years in the military went by, they never wanted to be high performance again. And they never remembered that at age 18 or 17 that they played volleyball recreationally, that they used to swim and surf recreationally. They completely forgot that. They just said, movement bad, biochemistry is telling me movement bad, hard drill sergeant, hard coach, hard general contracting bad, and I'm going to turn that off for the rest of my life because my mind never wants to do that again. But what happens to their mind, body, and spirit when they become sedentary? We all know the answer.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. And we only have about a minute left, but I just want to say very quickly that, you know, I remember being in high school gym class as well as high school sports, and it was a real punishment mentality. You know, it wasn't like you're doing this for your lifetime, you're doing this for fun, you're doing this to you know, like in yoga, yoke with God. You know, it's like it has nothing to do with any of that. It just has to do with like being better than other people or pushing yourself or in essence, it's like a form of, it was actually used as a form of punishment when I was in high school. So anyway, thank you so much for your message, Sifu Slim, of lifelong learning and lifelong, you know, coming into being a physical person in a physical world in a way that also feels good spiritually. So thank you so much. It's been wonderful talking to you, and have a great evening, and talk to you soon.
Yeah, if anybody wants any more information, sifuslim.com. I'd be happy to connect with you. Aloha.
Thank you, Sifu. Good night.
Night.